Welcome to GenX Journeys, the podcast that's all about rediscovering, reinventing, and thriving. I'm your host, Paul Stressner, and if you're part of Generation X, this show's for you. We dive into real stories of resilience, reinvention, and personal growth, all while celebrating the past and charging full speed into the future. Whether it's nostalgia-fueled throwbacks, inspiring conversations, or motivation to help you level up, GenX Journeys is here to remind you your best days are not behind you. They're happening right now, and you're just getting started. So let's get into it. Welcome back to GenX Journeys, everybody. I'm Paul Stressner, and as always, before we get started, I'll take a moment to reflect on something I'm grateful for today. And I'll say today I'm grateful for reinvention because something really hit me today. At church, I took a new role. I shadowed a couple. We have something called OP&5, Ocean Point 5. So when people come out of the service and they're new, you know, we answer any questions and stuff. We welcome people, and I think at least two different people at two totally different times said that I'm perfect for that job because I'm outgoing and friendly. And well, I've always been friendly, but I was always growing up, I was always painfully shy. And it's just crazy how it wasn't even intentional that how I reinvented myself. I think maybe the podcasting helped, and me traveling all over, running and, you know, meeting people in all different states and everything has helped me become more outgoing. But I thought that was just so cool, and I never would have thought that when I was younger. So and you know, it kind of makes me happy that I'm actually living what I'm preaching on here about how you can reinvent yourself. So I'm very grateful for that. And that'll bring us to today's guest, Mike DeLeo, an independent author from New York, and he wrote an incredible book that we'll talk about today. There are Places I Remember. It's a unique collection of interconnected stories that span the 70s, 80s, and 90s and beyond. And through themes of family, friendship, music, memory, and the passage of time, Mike captures experiences that many of us can relate to regardless of where we grew up. And Mike, welcome to GenX Journeys.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Paul.
And before we dive in, I always like to ask my guests, what are you grateful for today?
Well, it's interesting. You just asked me that. I just spent a nice day in the backyard with my wife and daughter. My wife and I have been empty nesters for, I guess, about 6 years now. My oldest, who's 23, just graduated from grad school. So she's kind of been away for the most part for 6 years. And my other daughter is a junior at college. And, you know, you always hear about parents fearing the empty nest. And we know some friends who have struggled with it. And I think for the most part, we've handled it well. But now that she's like home and, you know, she doesn't have a job yet and she's back home, it was just a nice Sunday, all of us in the backyard, just relaxing in a way that I feel like we haven't done in such a long time. So it was a nice feeling. So very grateful for that. So,
I love that. Incredible. Yeah, that must be so much fun. Like, yeah, it's great to see them grow up and go out. But then I know I'm not a parent myself, but I know, you know, through my parents that, you know, they love, you know, when we all visit and everything. And yeah.
Yeah. So it's, you know, it gets louder when they're home, even though they're adults, but they're 23 and 20. So it gets chaotic, but sometimes that's fun because when it's just the two of us, it could get very quiet sometimes, just, you know, through the normal grind of every day. So.
Yeah. Oh, so fun. So to start off, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then, we'll talk about the book after.
Yeah. So, yes, I live on Long Island, about, I guess, 40 miles from New York City, but I work in Manhattan. So I'm a commuter from Long Island. I work as a project manager. It's not the most exciting work. The company I work for, companies hire us when they move headquarters. So I'm the guy that goes in and manages the relocation of companies when they move buildings, when they move thousands of people. So that's what I do. Wow. I just moved J.P. Morgan Chase into their brand new headquarters in Midtown Manhattan, very large project. So, yeah, so that's what I do. It's sometimes exciting, but it's not, you know, people always say, "What do you do exactly?" And I explain it to them. They never quite understand what it is. But yes, I write on the side. That's kind of what I really want to do if I didn't have to have a day job, right? So,
Exactly.
so this book you mentioned that came out as my third book. The first book I wrote came out over 20 years ago, and then
Wow.
that was right before my youngest daughter was born, and then the writing kind of got pushed out of the way because I had too many other responsibilities, and it's something I dabbled in over the years as the kids were growing up, but never really was able to focus on it in the way you need to actually finish a book. But I grinded it out. I wrote a novella that came out in 2018 called Images of Broken Light, and I got some positive feedback from that. So I certainly, when that came out, I said, I want to write something else. And I sort of dove into this book without knowing when I started it that it was going to be a book of short stories. I actually planned on writing something different. I was planning on writing a book about my college roommate, a fictional story about my college roommate who had a great influence on my life, and then he tragically passed away from cancer when he was 49 years old. So I started writing that book, and it was going to be about our story and about friendship and how it changes over time and how, time and distance can affect a friendship like that. And I got 15 pages into it, and it was too emotional. I said, I can't do this. It was too much, only 15 pages in. So I just kind of stopped and put it aside. And then just on a whim, I wrote a short story, which is actually the first story in this book. It's a time travel story, and I wrote it. I gave it to my wife, and she said, that was pretty good. So I said, all right, let me write another one. So I wrote a second time travel story, which is about an old man in the future in his 90s who decides to go back in time. He gets the choice. He can go anywhere back in time, and he decides to go back to 1973 when he was 6 years old, and he wants to see the block that he grew up on, and he wants to see his mother again when she was young. And I wrote that story, and I gave that to my wife. She's like, wow, I like that one too. And that's when the light bulb went on. And I said, well, what if I write a bunch of stories about this old man? And we actually see him in his childhood, and we see him as he grows up and as he goes through his life. And then you could kind of connect those stories. So when you get to that last story, it has more of an impact because now you know who this old man is, and you kind of have read about his entire life. So that's when it kind of kicked in gear, and I started, Gen X here. I started going back to the early 70s and just started, reviewing my life. And, I guess I have a thing about nostalgia. So I enjoy doing that. And, I guess I'm the old man in one way, because if I had a chance to go back in time, that's where I would go, 1973. And in writing those stories in the early 70s and then into the 80s and 90s, in a way, as me as the writer, it's like I'm going back in time. It's like I'm in my little time machine here, and I'm recreating something from my past. So
Exactly.
it was fun to do that. And so many of the book is fiction, but many of the stories are drawn from my own experiences, some more so than others. And then I decided, well, I'm not just going to follow this one character. Let me create some other characters and sprinkle those stories in between, but do it with some connective tissue so that there's a running theme throughout. And you see these characters come and go, and I hope it tells a story almost like a novel, even though it's really not a novel. It's 40 individual stories, but they do tie together. So yeah, and I just kept going once I started. It took me longer to write than I expected, but I kept coming up with new story ideas, and I kept plugging them in. So
yeah, this was so unique. It is one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on this Gen X Journeys as opposed to the Gen X Book Club, because we're like backed up a little bit, and I really wanted to have you on as soon as I could, because I just like fell in love with this. It is something like totally different, and I love the way it's all different stories, and it jumps all over time, but it's that connective tissue, and the way you wrote it, it really hits, and especially that was a good point about how it hits at the end there. That made it even more impactful. It's just I just love the way that it flowed. Did it just seem to flow out of you as once you started going?
It did, and at any moment, and I know you and I spoke briefly earlier, and I wrote this book on my iPhone, on the Notes app of my iPhone, while taking the train to and from Manhattan every day, because I don't have. That's really the only free time I have, you know. So, so I would get story ideas. Sometimes they were more fully formed, and sometimes it was just a snippet of an idea, and I was constantly jotting story ideas down. In some cases, I would just come up with a title, and it would invoke a memory in me, and a story would spring from that. So yeah, I didn't write the stories in the order they are in the book. I kind of wrote them just as the idea came to me, and I would write it and finish it and put it aside. And I just kept doing that. And there were a couple times where I thought I was done, and then boom, 2 more story ideas would come. And I was like, oh yeah, those will work in this book. I could fit those in there. So I just kept going. And then, when I was done, old-fashioned guy I am from the 70s, 80s, I printed the stories out individually, stapled them together, and I literally put them on my bed with my wife saying, all right, how am I going to sequence these now? It was like I felt like a rock group that recorded a double album, and they have 30 songs, and now they have to figure out how to sequence the song, side A, side B. So, and it was just playing around and moving the stories around and coming up with what I thought would be the right sequence so that it would kind of flow smoothly and have the right impact. So that was actually kind of fun. That was more fun than the writing. The writing could be torturous at times, but once I put it together, that was fun. So.
Oh, yeah, that was a good analogy too with the music, because like my head went with the police doing an investigation and with all the string and everything.
Oh, sure, right, yeah.
But yeah, like doing like a concert, like you have all these separate songs or stories in this case, and
right.
Trying to figure out what order. Yeah.
And if you write more linear, I guess as a writer you could get stuck at a certain point because you're like, where do I go now? And with these stories, I could just stop and just say, I'm just going to write a completely different story, and we'll figure out later where in the book it's going to go. So
yeah,
you could kind of keep going that way without feeling like stuck or having writer's block or whatnot. So,
that's. If I have any writers listening, I feel the same way. I'm writing my book, Journey of the Roadrunner. I'm running a race in all 50 states, and I starting from my high school cross country, and then I was in the U.S. Navy, so I'm writing about that, and leading up to how I got back into running, and then covering each state. But I hit a point, like you said, like I had writer's block, and then I was stuck. But since I have like all these different chapters naturally with all the different states, so I like skipped ahead and was able to start writing, and then things started flowing. And then I'm able to go back and go back to where I was stuck and fix that.
And writing short stories, which I found, you can really kind of condense the story down to its essence. So I spoke about, I started to write what I thought was going to be a novel about my college roommate, and I stopped. But then when I was well into the book, I said, you know what? That novel I thought I was going to write about him, I can make that one of the short stories. So I ended up, what I originally envisioned in my head as a 250-page novel, I condensed that story into a 20-page short story about my roommate. And I think it worked because I didn't have to, I don't know, because it's kind of a sad story. I didn't have to like labor through it. I really just boiled it down to the essence and did it in 20 pages. And, so, and I've gotten positive feedback on that story too from a lot of people. So, yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah. It hit me too. Like another thing I really liked about it, like even though this isn't my story, I didn't live that. When I'm reading it, I'm feeling nostalgia, through the characters. Like I feel immersed in the story. So that, You did a great job writing that. And I wrote down one of the quotes the one that really hit. So always remember where you came from, Robbie. Remember the street because it'll never look or feel this way again. And that, that's like. Right. So true.
That's why he goes back at the end.
Yeah.
He kind of cheats the system, but yes.
But still, it does hit a little different. Like, I'm still I grew up in Rhode Island, but I'm like in a different part of the state, and I occasionally, like once a year or maybe even twice a year, there's something that we call Gatsby Days. It's like a almost like a 4th of July celebration.
Right.
And there's an arts and crafts fair that they have, and then a couple of weeks later they have a big parade, and there's a race I'm going to be running in. So when I go there, that was like, I used to be able to walk there. So when I go to these things, I go to my old neighborhood and go by my house, and even though it looks the same, it just, it's not the same. It just feels different.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that in the book. I mean, you read the book, and I had that experience. I drove by the house I grew up in probably over 20 years ago, and I hadn't been back in like over a decade. And I was with my wife. We might have been dating at the time or engaged, but we were in the area, and I said, "Oh, we got to swing by the block." And I drove down, and I grew up in a suburban street on Long Island, and the house was built in 1968, and all the houses were pretty much the same house, on a quarter of an acre of land. And my house was right in the middle. So we're driving down the street, and I was like, "Oh yeah, we're going to go see it." And I'm like, "Wait a minute, which one's mine?" And I got to the spot. It's like, "This is my address. That should be my house," but somehow it didn't look like it. And it's weird. It wasn't really even drastically different, but it was different enough that at the first moment I was like, I wasn't feeling like, "Oh, this is my home," because that tree's not there. The bushes that were there when I grew up are not there. And we had wood shakes in the house. Now it was aluminum siding. It was very bewildering, because it was like, I couldn't get my bearings for a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And, yeah.
So you have your memories, and your memories stick with you, and then obviously time goes by, and sometimes all you have is the memory, because the reality just isn't there anymore. So.
Yeah, exactly. The place is the same, but but you think of who you were at that time as opposed to what it is now. Yeah, it even like looks smaller, even though it's the same place. Yeah,
right.
But by my old elementary school and church and everything, so yeah, it's very strange. Yeah, and then there are places I remember. So I'm gonna go on a limb here and thinking that's coming from a Beatles song.
That's right. Yes. From the Beatles song "In My Life." Yes, that's it. Yes, that's the opening line.
Is there something about that really resonated with you, or did it just happen to tie in with your theme?
It wasn't the original title of the book. The original title was the title of the last story in the book, the one where the old man goes back, and that title is "When the Evening Comes," because I don't want to give away how that story ends, but that's the title. And I thought, the book, well, you read it, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but to me it's very melancholic. I mean, it's kind of somber, the book. I mean, the stories are not what I would call happy ones, and maybe there's a few that are, but
there's some.
I don't want to say it's a dark book, but it's a somber book. It deals with melancholy. So that's why I wanted to call it "When the Evening Comes," because I think it has a somewhat dark tone to it. But I gave it to my brother, who's a writer, to read. He was like the first one that read like the first draft, and he gave me positive feedback. But he said, "You got to change the title." I said, "Why? I love that title." And he says it doesn't really represent the book. Like if somebody sees that title, they're not going to. He's like, come up with something else that evokes what I think the book is really about. So I was sitting there, and I don't know, the song probably popped in my head, and I said, "There are places I remember." That actually is what the book is about.
Right. Yeah.
So I texted him back, and I said, "How about There Are Places I Remember?" He said, "Perfect. That's the book." He said, "That's." So, and I realized, he's right. That is the book. So.
Yeah, that is he a writer too, or
he is. He writes nonfiction. He's He's a film historian. So he writes about classic film and old Hollywood and that kind of stuff. So
okay,
but I trust his judgment on this stuff. So
yeah, definitely, because that's really good. Yeah, it's a really good catch there. So, yeah, it definitely fits. And it spans like everything that us Gen Xers went through. Even like the beginning, there's like about Vietnam veterans, so it made me think of like my parents. My dad was a Vietnam veteran, so it kind of like brought me back to the early 70s when all that was going on, and yeah, all through the 70s, 80s, 90s, and then there was even COVID. And
Yeah,
speaking of
well,
dark
yeah. There's
things,
there's a handful of stories like set in the present day. So
yeah,
yeah, well, there's even a quick story at the beginning about the moon landing. So I was born
yeah,
in '67. The moon landing was '69. So
yeah,
that story was based on a story my mother had told me.
uh-huh,
So it's about because they were having a block party on the block I grew up on, but I was only 2 years old, so I don't remember it. But
uh-huh,
it was a big block party in this new neighborhood. They'd moved there in '68, so that was the first summer they were there in '69, and it
uh-huh.
just happened to be the day that they landed on the moon. So
Oh wow.
that's where I got this idea for that story.
Mhm.
Um,
Oh,
yeah, and there's other things in there. The bicentennial. So I know Gen
yeah,
X. I guess I'm older Gen X because I was born in '67. But so I guess there are
yeah,
Gen Xers born in '78 who don't know anything
that,
about the
right.
bicentennial. But that was a big deal when I was 8 years old. That whole year, and
Hmm.
so I always remember that. And then there's yeah, the COVID. There's 9/11 stories in there because
Yeah,
I was there in Manhattan at the Trade Center on
yeah. I
9/11.
was gonna hit on that. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so that yeah, that was definitely once I got going, I was like, okay, that's definitely going to be in the book because that there's a couple of stories in there, and those. I mean, again, fiction, but it's pretty much the way it happened to me or the way I experienced it,
Right.
that day and then the days after. So, um,
Yeah. Yeah. So were you right there when that happened? Were you around
yeah,
that
so
area?
my wife and I and we had well we had we got married in '99 and we worked in the World Financial Center. The World Financial Center is literally right next door to the World Trade Center. They're actually connected by a footbridge over the West Side Highway. So, um, we would walk through the Trade Center every morning just to get to our building, which was on the other side of the highway. Um, yeah, so we were there that morning. So, and it's a big complex. The financial center has 5 buildings, and my wife and I worked in adjacent buildings. So we were actually in different buildings that morning. Um, and she was the one who called me to say, "Hey, something's going on. A plane hit the tower, and everybody's leaving the building." So I said, "All right, I'll meet you outside." Went downstairs. When I got downstairs, it was literally like hell had broken out on earth because all this stuff was raining down from right above us, and you know, police, people kind of freaking out, and everybody looking up, watching the first tower burn. Um, and I don't want to get too morbid, but then people
Mhm.
started screaming. People are jumping out of the building, and that's like, all right. I couldn't find my wife. I was like, is she not here? So I went back inside, up to her building, up to her floor. I get up to her floor. I don't see anybody because they're all in the corner conference room, looking out the window, watching the first tower burn. And
Mhm.
literally, right when I got into that conference room where I found her, the second plane hit, and it hit right in front of us because we heard it
Wow.
first. We saw the jet coming, and it was like, and that was that instantaneous moment of because the 5 seconds before that second plane hit, everybody thought, "Oh, this is an accident. Some
Mhm.
straight plane hit the tower. Isn't that terrible?" And then when we saw the second jet, it was like, "Oh, our world just changed. This is a terrorist
Yeah.
attack. This is war. This is
Mhm.
completely different than what we thought it was a minute ago." And then
Right.
we all got out of the building, and well, you read the
So,
story, and then
yeah.
um, and yeah, there's another follow up story about the days after that near Ground Zero, where I was
Mhm.
for a couple of months after the attack. And
Mhm.
so,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
So
definitely life
powerful.
changing. We both left
Mhm.
the company we worked for right after that because things were just chaotic. So it was
Mhm.
definitely a fork in the road for our lives, at that time. So,
Mhm.
yeah,
That yeah, that one really. I for the 50 state journey by New York race was the Tunnel to Towers, and I
right.
actually done that one a few times, and yeah, that's just so powerful. We run through the well, it was called the Battery Tunnel. I think they changed the name of it now, and then
Right.
yeah, then we come out, and then we end up finishing at the World Trade Center. So
Right.
yeah, yeah, and even though we had talked about this before, that even though it takes place in New York, I think people throughout the country would get this, and
Yeah.
yeah, you
And I
don't have
think
to know New York to get these stories.
Yeah, and I think I had said when I was writing it, I was concerned like is the story too New York, Long Island centric, where only people who grew up in that area are gonna like get it. But I've heard from a lot of people who don't have never lived anywhere near New York, and they seem to get it. I think it's certainly, if you're Gen X, and certainly if you're suburban, I think suburbs in the 70s and 80s in America are pretty much the same everywhere. It doesn't matter, which suburb it was, So I think anybody who grew up in that realm can relate to these stories.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Has writing the book changed the way you think about your memories? Like, how was that going back?
I think I think most writers, this is just my opinion, have strong memories. I mean, they have good memories, is what I say. I think writers, when they kind of go through the world on a daily basis, remember things more clearly or just more in detail than non-writers do. So I feel like, writing this book, a lot of the stories in this book were stories that I've had with me, since I was a kid and as I grew up, and some of them were stories I told my kids, but it was good to just kind of like empty the tank, so to speak, and actually put them on paper, for the first time, and kind of lock it in. I guess even your own stories, if you tell them enough times, the story might change over time.
Yeah.
So, like I said, a lot of these stories are based on real events. So I have friends who I grew up with who have read the book, and you could describe something and they might interject something they remember that you don't, and vice versa. And so is my memory exactly the way it happened? Probably not, but I think it's closer than other people, because I don't know. I think writers, we're observers. We observe and then we kind of take it in, where other people might just let it go right past them and they've already forgotten about it. We kind of hold it in and keep it inside. So I guess it's a good thing to get it out. So,
yeah. One funny thing I've noticed is I'm writing my book, like I'm going back, and then as I'm writing, then I'm remembering other things I had totally forgotten, but it's all coming back to me as I'm writing. So
right.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy how that happens. And we also talked about I have my New York connections because my dad was born and raised in Brooklyn, and so I go back often, and I'm a Mets fan, and you're a Yankees fan.
My condolences, Paul. I'm sorry about that.
I know, especially this year. Oh man!
All right, so there's a whole story in there about the 2000 World Series. So people who don't remember that was the Yankees versus the Mets, the famous Subway Series that New York hadn't seen since the 1950s. Yeah. And as a Yankee fan, it was terrifying because the Yankees went into that World Series as the two-time defending world champs, and they're the Yankees. They're supposed to win. They're supposed to beat the Mets. Mm-hmm. The Mets were a wild card team, an upstart team, and didn't have any of the pressure on them. All the pressure was on the Yankees to win that series. And as Yankee fans, we all felt it. So, even 2 years ago, the Yankees went to the World Series in 2024, and they almost played the Mets. The Mets, and I was dreading. Oh my God! I was like, "Oh, I have to go through that again." Anyway, that's the only story in the book that I intentionally wanted it to be somewhat humorous. Like we were just talking. The other stories in the book are somewhat somber, right?
Yeah.
And when I said, I'm going to write about that week because it was so stressful for me as a fan. And then if you remember, I started it with other moments in my life as a sports fan, a Yankee fan, a Giant fan, and whatnot. But I said, that story is about just the insanity of sports fandom, how you can invest so much into rooting for a team, and whether they win or lose, if they win, you don't get anything out of it. They get the ring, they get the millions of dollars, they get the accolades. What do you get? And if you and so why are you so invested? So when they lose, you're in such pain and turmoil. Yeah. So the story is about that, about how silly it is. So I intended that story. It's very real. It's how it happened to me or how I experienced that week. But I intended it to be funny. So I hope when people read that, they kind of laugh at it because the way this main character is reacting to what's happening is just ridiculous. But that's the way most sports fans react when their team is, playing for a championship and whatnot. So.
Yeah, especially baseball fans. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I could totally relate. Yeah.
Right. So, Yeah, and look, who am I to complain? I'm a Yankee fan. I've won more than anybody, right? And yet,
Right.
even as a Yankee fan who's won all the time, you still are heartbroken when it doesn't go your way, which even that makes no sense, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, but anyway, I
Yeah.
like that story because I could read about it now because I know how it's going to end. Like I know he's happy for me,
Right.
right?
Yes.
Um, but I could laugh along with it because it was intended to be funny. So yeah,
You know, wow. I'm thinking, wow, it's 40 years since the Mets won.
right,
They're not doing it this year.
right.
But I'm, being a Mets fan, I'm actually in Red Sox territory, so
Sure.
that was stressful for me at that time because there might have been maybe three of us in my high school that were rooting for the Mets, so I would have never
Right.
heard the end of it.
Yeah, as a Yankee fan, I didn't enjoy that World Series because I couldn't root for anybody.
Right.
Yes,
That's so funny.
I tried to tell. I was in college in '86 when and one of my best friends was a big Met fan, so I was kind of experiencing that through him. But I was like, I tried to tell myself, you know what? Whoever wins, I'll be happy because I'll be glad the other one lost.
Right, there you go. Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it.
So,
Yeah, but when the first year I ever played baseball, it was an instructional league, and there were only two teams, the Yankees and Red Sox, and I was on the Yankees. So
Ah.
there we go. That's my Yankees connection. And my dad grew up. Well, he was in Brooklyn, so the Dodgers left when he was maybe 11 or 12. So
Right.
then the Yankees were the only team around. So he would go see the Yankees often, and that was when Mantle and Maris and everything, those glory
Right.
days. So I grew up hearing all about the Yankee stories. I knew more about the Yankees than the Red Sox.
how did you
being
become a Met fan then?
I tend to root for the underdogs.
Okay.
Yeah, but then my dad's best friend lived on Long Island, so we go visit them. And they were huge Mets fans, and
Right.
that kind of helped too. And then I still haven't been to Yankee Stadium yet, but we went to Shea Stadium at that time. We went a couple of games there, and that was in '84. So that was when they were really starting to
Yeah.
get good and everything. So just being in that environment that really helped too. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I grew up on Long Island is very, people think in New York, oh, everybody's a Yankee fan. But Long Island's very split even. It might even go slightly towards the Mets. And it certainly was that way when I grew up in the early 70s. In the early 70s, the Yankees weren't good. And the Mets had won in '69, and they almost won in
Right,
'73, and they had Tom Seaver. So I grew up around a lot of Met fans as a kid, and I was like, oh, the little Yankee fan. Oh, too bad those Yankees stink. And then, well, I got the last laugh on that one, I guess. But that's
Yeah. Yeah, they had a great team in the late '70s. That was a great rivalry with the
Yes.
Yankees and Red Sox. They both had
Yes,
great teams,
definitely.
so that was a good time.
Yeah.
So, is there any particular decade that you're more drawn to? The '70s, '80s, '90s? What do you?
Well, I would say that in terms of nostalgia, I'm a '70s guy versus an '80s guy. I don't know. I like the music better. I like the movies better. The TV shows. My wife. I'm born in '67. My wife was born in 1970, and she's an '80s chick without a doubt.
Yeah.
So we always tease each other because I don't know. I guess I don't like all the synthesized music of the '80s and stuff. I feel like the '70s music was more real. So if some cheesy '80s song comes on and she starts dancing, I'll just make fun of her and say. But I love the '90s. I feel like the '90s was pre 9/11. The economy was great. Derek Jeter and the Yankees were winning World
Oh
Series.
yeah, there you go. That was the real reason.
Yeah.
They were a dynasty. Yeah.
I was living in Manhattan at the time when I was single, and everything was great in the city. It was so that I think the '90s. I think there's a lot of '90s nostalgia going on right now in the world. Right, even my kids' age, everybody's into '90s nostalgia.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I enjoyed the '90s, but I was an adult in the '90s. I was in my 20s. So you don't have that reverence for a time period. At least I did, like you do when you were a kid.
Right.
So when I think of the early and mid '70s, that's why I wrote the book. As you can see all those stories set at that time period in the book.
That was great. Yeah, I was born in '70 also, so
Right.
but yeah, I have a lot of nostalgia for the '70s. Yeah, I loved all the TV shows. That's when Star Wars came out and everything.
Right.
And
I mean, I was 9.5 when Star Wars came out, and when it came out, again, I grew up in a very movie centric family. That's why my older brother
uh,
is a film historian, so
mm,
we always saw movies before anybody else. And when Star Wars first opened, it opened in Manhattan and L.A., and it opened in one theater on Long Island, which was like 40 minutes from where we lived, and we
mm,
went because my brother's like, this movie just came out, and it's supposedly the greatest thing you've ever seen.
uh,
And I remember coming home and I trying to tell all my other 9-year-old friends, you got to see this movie I just saw, and they didn't even know what I was talking about. But yeah,
uh.
so I certainly remember that. Yeah,
Yeah, it is. Yeah, of course. Like I my first blog and podcast was Return to the '80s, so of course, like I'm partial to the '80s, and then I kind of got mad with the '90s with the whole grunge period and stuff.
right.
But now I feel nostalgic for it now that like I've been away from it, and I don't know. Maybe it's different because I'm at a like grown now, but I don't feel like there's any nostalgia stuff happening now. It just I don't know. There's
Yeah.
something I can't describe it. Yeah, everything seems to be siloed, and I don't know. There's
Well, that's true. I talk about this with my wife too. I mean, yes, culture is siloed now. Um, when we were kids, and even when our parents were kids, if somebody was a big movie star, everybody in the country knew who that person was, even if you never saw one of their movies. Or
Mm,
you know, in the '70s or '80s, I'll just pick a name, Bruce Springsteen. Even
mhm.
if you didn't know a Bruce Springsteen song or never bought one of his records, you knew who he
Knew he
was.
was. Yeah.
Right.
Hmm.
In the '90s, you knew who Tom Hanks was, even if you didn't go to the movies, because our big pop stars, rock stars, movie stars, TV stars, you knew who, there were three channels on TV and everybody went to the movies, or if you didn't go, you saw the trailers on TV every night. So you knew what was
Hmm.
going on. You knew who these people were. You saw them on the Tonight Show or the Today Show. And now there are people that are super duper famous within their silo that nobody else knows, right?
Right. Yeah.
And even among movie stars and TV stars, there are so many TV shows and streaming services. If you don't have
Hmm.
that streaming service,
You don't
you
know.
haven't seen 4 seasons of that show that your coworker is talking about nonstop and loves the lead actor or actress, and that you don't
Hmm.
even know who they are. That didn't
Right.
happen when we grew up. You grew up, you knew who the people were, even if you weren't fans of them. So the culture was more cohesive than it is now, certainly. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. Yeah. Even like all the award shows I never heard of any of the movies, albums, whatever,
right.
TV shows. Or if there's like a actor we do know they're in movies that I never heard of.
Right. But when you were a kid, that wouldn't have been the case. Even
Right.
if you didn't see the movies, you knew who they
Mhm.
were.
Yeah.
You knew that so and so was in a movie and it was a hit, even though you didn't go see it. Now it's like it can come and go, and you weren't even aware it existed.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, even on radio. Oh, I can't see it now. I got my MTV shirt on.
Sure.
Back they played like all the different genres all in one spot. So even if you weren't a fan of a particular genre or band or whatever, you would still know it. You know the songs and
You would know who
everything.
they were, right? 'Cause,
Yeah.
yeah. Right. Yeah. MTV. Right. You'd see a Madonna video, a Michael Jackson video, and then I was gonna, Motley Crue. Right.
Right.
Right. Three in a row, and they're which even that you wouldn't hear that on the radio necessarily, but on
Yeah.
MTV you saw it. So
Yeah. 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 Those were the days. Well, on that topic, like after, like I had mentioned that quote that I love that you never we go back. Well, what did I remember this street because they'll never look or feel this way again. When you look back at your life today, what's something right now that you think you'll look back on with nostalgia someday,
oh wow.
even if it's not like pop culture?
Yeah. Well, see, uh, I think I've had that problem my whole life that I always look back, which is,
Hmm.
people would say that's not necessarily a good way to live. You should be living in the moment or looking ahead. And I think I say that in the book a couple of times. Where the mother says to her son, "Be here now.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Stop looking back because there's no point." And I can remember, this was not silly. I can remember being, 10 years old and longing for the days of when I was 5. Like, which when you're 10, 5 years old seems like a lifetime ago because it almost is.
Yeah, half your life. Yeah.
Right? And it just, because I was like, oh, you know what? Like the block was so much better when I was 5. Everybody was more friendly and everybody knew everybody. And now it feels like we're growing apart. I was 10 years old and I was already had that mindset of, gee, it was so much better in the old days.
Yeah.
So as I've gotten older, I've tried to not do that. And, I'm 58 now. So, and there's a lot more to look back on than there was, when I was a kid. And I have kids. You try to look at the world through their eyes, and look at their lives and their future, and kind of focus on that, and not look us back as much as let's say I would usually do. And yet I say that, and I spent a few years writing a 400-page book about looking back. So I can't get away from it completely. And I'm working on something else right now. And most of the book is going to be set in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So I guess, even if I try to get away from it, the nostalgia pulls me back. So, yeah.
Do you think that's going to be your signature as a writer?
I think I finally settled on that as a writer. That's my thing. I guess every writer has a thing, and I guess that's mine. I guess, I feel like, I lived through the 70s and 80s, and if somebody's going to write about those times, it should be someone like me who lived it and remembers it and can put a real perspective on it because I was there, as opposed to, I wouldn't try to write about the 1940s and 50s because I didn't live it. My parents told me about it, but that's not the same. So, so I feel like I'm like a Gen X historian. Let me keep writing about it because that's, those are my formative years. So whatever my view of the world is, it was formed in those decades. So, so I guess it pulls me back. So.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's so funny. It's even in your book, like you just said, like you don't know about World War II, but you talk to people that have, so you can talk about like what they said instead of like going to that time. But
right.
So that's pretty cool. All right, so I guess we can start to wrap things up. Oh, I usually do my little fun questions at the end. Who are some of your favorite artists?
Well, you might know this from reading my book. I'm a huge Beatles fan. So, and I'm going to mention a bunch of bands from the 70s now, right? The Beatles of the 60s, but actually became a Beatles fan after John Lennon was killed because as a New Yorker, when that happened, it was such a huge story, and it was in the news for weeks and months afterwards, and that's what actually got me into the Beatles. But I love the Rolling Stones and Pink Floyd and Fleetwood Mac. Elton John, we're going to talk 70s and 80s again. I love
there you go. Yeah.
I love 70s Elton John.
Yeah.
I do not like 80s Elton John.
Yeah.
I just feel like his music from 70, 76 is brilliant, and the 80s stuff, I don't know, I find it a little cheesy, but that's me. So,
yeah. There's like a few songs I like, but it might be like a handful, but yeah, I agree with you there.
Right.
Yeah, I love the 70s stuff. Yeah.
So those are music. Those groups from late 60s, early mid 70s are my favorites. I'm a big James Bond fan. There's a little of that in the book, but I'm like a bit of a James Bond nut. My first book was a nonfiction book about the James Bond movie, so James Bond always kind of seeps into my books somehow. So somebody goes to see a Bond movie or something, or I think the two characters in the book have an argument about Connery versus Moore in the book in one of the stories. So
yeah, I was going to ask you who's yours.
Oh, Connery's definitely my favorite. Yes. I mean, I'd like Roger too, but But it was funny, again, movie-centric family. I saw a lot of the Connery movies. They would re-release them in the early 70s. So when Roger came along, most of my friends my age, their first experience with Bond was Roger Moore. So he was their Bond. And I'd be like, no, Sean Connery's better. And they're like, who?
Yeah.
So I'm thankful I got to see him first. Otherwise I might have felt like they did. I don't know. So
Yeah, that's kind of what happened to me. Yeah, like Yeah, Roger Moore was the first one I was aware of, especially probably Moonraker was the first one that I was like aware of, even
Right.
though others came out while I was around. But yeah, probably because of like my connection with Star Wars. When after Star Wars came out, there was all kinds of space movies coming out. So yeah, so then and then Octopus, Left Your Eyes Only, and then they would show James Bond movies on TV, and then there would be like a Connery on, and I'd say, "Who's that?" That's a weird James Bond.
The Sunday night movie on ABC for most of the 70s and 80s, it was a James Bond movie. Yeah,
Yeah.
So that's how many people. Yeah, most of the kids my age, that's how they got introduced to Sean Connery, watching ABC on Sunday night. And
Yeah.
of course, they would chop up the movies and edit them in horrible ways sometimes back then. But yeah, that's
Oh, that's right too. That brings me back with that edited. That would be a fun thing to go back to see what words they substitute.
yeah. But it's funny you mentioned Moonraker. There's a story in the book set in 1979. That's when Moonraker came out, and it's the story called The Prowler. And the kids were talking about all the movies they'd seen that summer, and Moonraker was one of them. And that's when they started arguing about that. So.
Yeah. All right. And then, who were some of your crushes when you were growing up?
Oh, okay. Let's see. I was going to say Nicole Kidman, but that was when I was much older. I think I had in the 80s. I had the Heather Thomas poster. She was the other
yeah.
Heather. Remember, there was Heather
Right.
Locklear and Heather Thomas. I guess she was on the Fall Guy.
Fall Guy. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
had that poster, so that that got me through high school a little bit. And Wonder Woman in the 70s.
Oh, it's Linda Carter. Oh, yeah.
So I would say, Linda Carter was definitely a crush in the late 70s. Yeah.
She's still gorgeous.
Yes. And my favorite Charlie's Angel was Jacqueline Smith. See, I guess I prefer the brunette. So Linda Carter, Jacqueline Smith. Yeah. She was my favorite angel. So.
Nice. Okay, and want to tell people where they can find your book and how they can contact you?
Sure. Yeah. So I'll even show it here.
There we go.
This is the book. There are places I remember. The best place is on Amazon. You can get the Kindle or the paperback. Paperback's $14.95. Kindle is $2.99. You can get it on BarnesandNoble.com as well, or if you go to a bookstore, they could order it for you. So
Okay.
and my website is michaeldilioauthor.com, and yeah, I've gotten good feedback on the book from a lot of Gen Xers. Like I said, I was nervous when it came out that maybe the stories were too personal and maybe they were too New York centric, but it turns out they're universal, I guess, because a lot of people seem to like them. So that feels good. So.
Yeah, and I definitely vouch for this. So yeah, that's why I had to have you on. I reached out to you as soon as I read it. Oh my god, yeah, it's incredible. So I highly recommend it. Yeah, I'll be definitely be posted the links to that. I'll post it on the socials and everything. And I don't know. Do you have any final thoughts? Anything might have missed?
Well, I want to thank you for having me on. So as an independent author, it's always great when somebody wants to talk about your book because I need all the promotion I can get.
Oh, for sure, I know that.
Yeah. I just what, for any other Gen Xers that have the nostalgia bug, I feel your pain because sometimes it's fun to look back, but sometimes it hurts too. But I guess writing the book for me was kind of cathartic, and like I said, I think other people who've read it feel the same way. So I'm pleased about that. So, and I thank you again. So.
Yep, and thank you for joining me, sharing your story and everything. It's incredible, and thank you everybody for listening and watching. Yeah, I really appreciate it, Mike. I just love this. And do you have anything else coming up that you wanna?
Well, I am working on another book right now. And like I said, it's kind of nostalgia heavy again. But I'm only about 80 pages into it, so I don't know how long it's going to be. And I'm still doing my thing, writing on my iPhone on the train. So sometimes that takes long. So
your other books are available still?
Oh yeah. So my other book, my novella is called Images of Broken Light, which is a fictional story about when John Lennon got murdered. It's a story about Beatles fans in New York and how that event changed their life. And my nonfiction book, also on Amazon, is called The Spy Who Thrilled Us. A Guide to the Best of Cinematic James Bond.
I love it.
So that actually came out in the early 2000s. So it goes through like the Brosnan years. You know, it
Oh,
predates
okay.
the Daniel Craig years.
Great. Cool. All right. So be on the lookout for that. And yeah, thank you everybody for listening. Hope you enjoyed the show. And we'll see you real soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
And remember,
Be excellent to each other. And party on, dudes!
sit, Lizzie, sit. Good dog.